do we value life? Do we value life as people? Does our culture as a whole value life? We value our own lives, don't we? And the lives of our loved ones, those closest to us, our friends, but we hang on to our life, and it's our most really precious personal possession. It's life itself. But has our core value of human life begun to dissolve? I think if we look around, and we can see that our culture has started to devalue life. And again, not our own lives, because that's part of the problem, right? Our own stuff has become so valuable to us. And we're truly living in a time of my life is more important than anything else, than anyone else. And we look at our personal freedoms, and we say that those are our priority. Our personal conveniences, I'm going to say, have become more valuable, more important than life itself. And it's not getting any better, family. Pardon me. We're on week number 4 of a series called The Calamity of Culture. And if you haven't been here every week, I'll give you just a brief recap. In week 1, we looked at and we talked about how our culture, and it's been over a number of years, but slowly sometimes, more quickly others, is removing God. God has become unconstitutional in the United States anyway. Week number 2, we looked at King Solomon's quest for the good life, if you remember. He had possessions, he had experience, he had power. He denied himself no pleasure. Yet he said without God, it was like chasing the wind. Nothing mattered without God, because all blessings are from him. And last week we talked about how truth in our culture has become unimportant, even has become a burden to some in a culture that has no borders anymore, really no morality. Truth just holds us back. And it's become relative and subjective. And remember, my truth might not be your truth. That's what culture tells us. On the flip side of that, there is a truth that is everyone's truth, that one day we're all going to stand before God and have to answer for what we've done or not done. But today I want to talk to you about the value of life. In fact, that's the title of our teaching today. And again, in the context of culture, do you think that we value life? You can yell it out. Someone says no. Some would say yes, right? Look how good life is, they'll say. We have so many freedoms, right? We're evolving so nicely into a culture that celebrates life. And I would ask, are we really, though? Are we really? We're going to get, I told you in this series, it's going to be a little different for me because I don't a lot of times dig into specifics. We're going to get really specific today. Get really specific. And we're going to talk about some examples of why I don't think that our value of life is going up. In fact, I think it's going down. Well, you all watch the news probably, right? You've heard of this crime that's become prevalent in the last 10, 20 years called human trafficking. You heard of that? So they take a human person from their own life. In essence, it's a kidnapping, if you will, a lot of the times. Some are taken by force. Others are lured in because of their vulnerabilities. And they prey on the weak, the addicted, the poor, mentally ill. They take these people and they force them into labor. And a lot of times it's in the sex trade. It'd be films, prostitution. And they use people up until there's nothing left. And many times they just leave them to die. And they do it for money. It's all for money. And it's a crime, okay? And it's not widely accepted by most of our culture, but we live in a world where a faction of people think that it's okay to destroy lives for money. For money. And sometimes the abuse is just to gratify ourselves, right? People in power, we see this in the news, using and abusing children. And it's sad that it's come out that some of our churches are not even a safe place. What about killing? A lot of us here lived through 9/11. And that was, maybe for some of us, the first time where killing for faith came to the forefront of the news. People killing in the name of their God. Terrorism in the name of religion. Not really a new thing. We've had violence in religion for many, many centuries, but coming to the forefront. How about killing for entertainment? We see a lot of killing just for the sake of killing, right? A few years back, a man opens fire from a hotel balcony, kills almost 60 people at a concert. Why? No motive. Someone breaks into a house and slaughters the occupants for what little bit of possessions maybe they have. These are all crimes. It's all against the law, but it's happening, family. These next two are unfortunately not crimes, but how about killing for convenience? Killing for convenience, and I'm talking about abortion now. Just going to throw that right out there. And we don't get into a lot of we don't really ever get into politics here from the pulpit, but and when I say abortion, I want you to understand that to me that is the killing of a human baby as a means of birth control. You can argue medical, and I'm not going to get into all that, but killing a baby is a means of birth control. And we all know about this. It's been all over the news, really, since 1972, 73, when Roe v. Wade was enacted, or that decision was made by the Supreme Court. We've talked about it. We've defined it. We've debated it. There's been protests and violence, and arson. It's still the same concept. Human life devalued for convenience. You've probably heard this phrase, my body, my right. Heard that? It's like me saying, my car, my right. I can do whatever I want to you if you're in my car. Do whatever I want. My car. One time a pro-choice person asked me, why should I not be allowed to go to the doctor to have a useless organ removed? Referring to a baby, a fetus. And I thought that was really kind of insulting to everyone alive, that at some point we were all a useless organ that could have been thrown away. People like Mother Teresa, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., useless organs that they would have been okay with just throwing away. People that changed the world. How many of those people have we thrown away in the last 50 years? It's a human baby, a gift from God. It's not a useless organ. Sorry, I'm a little upset with that one. I think I've told you all that I was adopted. And before Roe v. Wade, so I just dated myself. But 2023, over 1 million abortions in the United States. The sad part is there's over 1 million people waiting to adopt babies. I think if we do that math, we might be able to solve our abortion crisis. More than that, what about euthanasia? Have y'all heard about this? It doesn't get talked about as much. It's basically legalized suicide. And there's some compassion to the concept. I'll admit that. There's some compassion. And people that are suffering. This is how the original idea came about. People that were suffering with terminal illnesses, that were going to die, that were in extreme suffering. So there's some compassion to the concept. But I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, it's understandable, right? But are we playing God? Are we playing God? Now watch this, because this is concerning. Euthanasia, or medically assisted death, it's expanding. It's expanding into non-terminal illnesses. 2016, Canada legalized euthanasia for terminally ill adults. It was amended in 2021 to include people with non-terminal conditions and those with disabilities. The Netherlands, it's been legal since 2002. But there, can legally end your life if you're diagnosed with depression. And this is the one that really kind of painted the whole picture of where our culture is going for me. In 2023 in the Netherlands, euthanasia was approved for children as young as 1 year old. Now, who's making that decision? These children aren't deciding that. Family, that's just post-birth abortion. That's all that is. My child is ill. They have a disability. They shouldn't have to live like this. But is it for the child or is it for the convenience of the parents? And culture said this is okay. Culture says this is good. Life is losing its value. We don't even value our own lives like we used to. In the United States, suicide rates are up 40% since the year 2000. It's 25 years. Yet we're convinced, and our culture is convinced, that we're really improving, right? Especially here in the United States. However, in 2024, the United States was ranked 23rd on the happiness scale of countries in the world. 23rd. Life's becoming less valuable. Maybe perhaps we need a different perspective. Maybe something from the Bible. Would you open your scripture with me this morning if you have it? If you need scripture, there should be Bibles in front of you. The book of Psalm 139, chapter 139, please. We're just going to study a few verses today. I'm going to read for you starting in verse 13. This is David writing. He says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." And I'm going to take from that scripture this morning, hopefully, and give you 4 points as to why I know that we need to value life. Number 1, God created you. God created you. You don't have to turn there, but in Genesis 1 it says God created you in His image. That phrase, "in His image," is a Hebrew word pronounced salam. Salam. In context, it means a representation or a reflection of God. God created you to be a reflection of Himself. We were all made with the ability to reflect God's nature. You know, we're cognitive. We can reason and we can make decisions. We understand justice and love, and we can create. Maybe the most important is, like God, we're relational. We value our relationships. God created us in a special way. I don't know if you can all see. Can you see that guitar right there behind me this morning? I brought that out today, and that's a bass guitar. That's mine. It's not the most expensive guitar that I have. It's probably not even the best sounding guitar that I have. But if we ever fell on hard times and I had to start, God forbid, selling my guitars off, this would probably be one of the last ones to go, because, you see, I built this one. It came from eBay, tattered and torn and beaten, and I nursed it back to life with love, did some paint work, changed some components, and now it's one of the ones that I value the most because I had a hand in it. And as far as I know, it's the only one, like it anywhere. I mean, exactly. And the other guitars, they're more expensive. But if those were to go, I can just replace those because they came off an assembly line, right? Some of them, they're just from the factory, which is great, but they're easily replaceable. You see, you were crafted by hand. Every part of you, from your ears down to your toes, was picked by God. Everything that you are, even the parts maybe you don't care for, handmade. Always more valuable. And God did that. And God values you. Okay, not only did He create you, but David says He created you fearfully and wonderfully. And those phrases confused me for a lot of years. Like, what does that mean, fearfully, wonderfully? Well, fearfully means that God created you with reverence and with awe. And he didn't just throw mix into a bowl. I know a lot of you are bakers and you make things from scratch, but at our house, if we're going to make a cake, we pour it from the box and put the liquid in and the egg. And so I know, but there was no human mix that God just, he made you from scratch. Let's say that. And there was respect in the process, a carefulness that made the whole thing work. And wonderfully means that you were designed and created uniquely with excellence. With excellence. Have you all ever purchased something that was designed and it worked well for a while, but it had cheap parts and didn't last very long? Or how about an item that had great parts, but the design just didn't make it really work the way you needed it to work? Either of those things is frustrating. Guys, could you put up, Daniel, put up that first picture for me, slide number 1. Just want to show you this real quick. You guys know what this is? Anybody? That is a picture of DNA. DNA, which stands for a really long word. I'm not going to give that to you, but it's what makes us up. It's the building block. It's like the new fingerprint. Unless you're an identical twin, no one in the world has the same DNA as you. Exactly. No one. There are some things that you can match up with your relatives, but it's unique to you. It makes everything about you, your eye color, your hair color, your body size, your strength, your predispositions, and to some extent your likes and your dislikes. It's like the seed from which you grew. And God designed that. He designed that. It's in your blood, your hair, your spit, your saliva. If you guys were to, now don't do this, please, but if you were to spit on the carpet right now, and we didn't have the carpet cleaned for years, your DNA could still be in here. And this comes from my old police days, okay? But they could find DNA that was years old, depending on the situation. And they could point that to you because it's yours, designed by God. And that can't happen by chance or randomness. God put you together in such a way that you're one of a kind. If you were not valuable, if your life was not valuable, he would not have taken such great care. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. Number 3, God knows us completely. God knows us completely. When did you first, let me ask you this, let me turn that around. When did God first meet you? Was it conception, birth, when you got saved maybe? Let's say way before that. Look at verse 15 with me again here in Psalms 139. David said, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. So before you were conceived, before you were born, God knew you. God knew you. And that's a really strange concept for some of us. And the only way to really describe it is that God doesn't exist within the confines of time. So before we were born, before we existed here, we existed with God. Sometimes we get frustrated with God's timetable because we think he moves too slow. Maybe to him it's really fast. But see, we exist within timetables and schedules. And we're born and the clock starts ticking, right? And we say, well, I've got to turn 5 or 6 or whatever, and I've got to go to school. And I've got to graduate by a certain time of my life. I've got to go to college at a certain time. I've got to be married by a certain age and have children. And have my career in place before this can happen or that can happen. And retire at a certain age and then pray for as many years after that as we can get, right? But see, God doesn't exist within our timetables or our schedules. He just exists. And he's always existed. To God, every detail of us existed before our bodies were here and will exist infinitely with him. And lastly, God has a purpose for you, for us. Look at verse 16. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So for no other reason, a completely practical reason, your life is valuable. All life is valuable because God has a purpose for it. God has a purpose. David says God has a book. He's got stuff about you written down in it. Your purpose. Now, pay attention now, okay, family? This is important. We have a big giant God, right? And God can't even fathom the size of God. He's the most powerful, most intelligent, present, loving being ever existed. He created you. He created the earth and everything that we see. And we learned last week, didn't we, that should be enough to prove his existence. But that big God, unexplainable, he gave you life. You, me, all of us, with a purpose. With a purpose. He needs you for something special. I don't know how anyone can try to minimize that, devalue that. I'm going to say woe to anyone who takes away from that. That's my new word, woe, because we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Woe to anyone that tries to take away from what God has purposed. I used to say a lot that I wasted years in my life. That when I was younger, if I would have been doing things different, I could have had more years to serve God. But then I realized that everything that happened to me was preparation. And God brought me into the ministry. He brought me here exactly when he wanted me to be here. His timetable, his plan, and his purpose for me happened just when it was supposed to. How we get sidetracked, though, is that we make it about our purpose, not his. We start listening to culture, and it tells us we need certain things like money, career, family, popularity, retirement plan. Sometimes we realize at a certain point we don't have those, and we panic. I'll tell you, God says you're valuable without those things. You're valuable because of the purpose that I gave you. That's his message. It doesn't matter what culture says. You're valuable because God has a purpose and he created you. Band, you can come on back up as I get close to being done here. But turn to me, if you would, to the book of Ephesians. Real quick. We were here a couple months ago, I think, maybe back in the summer. But Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. I just want to read you one verse. You might remember this. It's from the New Living Translation. It says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago." We did a whole sermon, I think, on this one verse. But you, every one of you, is God's masterpiece. Someone yell out masterpiece. There we go. You can do a little better than that, but I'll give you. Now watch this. You say, Pastor, how do we live this? How do I live this in my life? How do I put this into application? We need to embrace a personal identity that's built on that promise. It's exclusively built from that promise. Live as his masterpiece. Identity gets thrown around. Culture says you should be this, you should be that. You can choose to be this, you can choose to be that. But your culture cannot give you identity. Can't give you identity. It doesn't come from position or status, possessions or gender, sexual preference. There's no identity in that, no value in that. It's already been given to you by God. Culture can't give that to you. Those are things that are clear to us when we shine as we live in God's purpose and live counterculturally. But it's not just about us. Okay? To live this out, we need to treat every person, no matter how broken or different, as the most valuable person you've ever met. That's how God looks at them. Some of you say, well, what about smelly, dirty people? Valuable. What about people who worship idols? Valuable. People who disagree vehemently with me and what I believe? Valuable life. How about murderers? This is a good one, right? I had a conversation one time with someone that didn't think murderers could go to heaven. And my question was, why not? Okay, their sin can't be forgiven, but ours can. What about pedophiles? Ooh, that's a hard one, isn't it? We'd take the murderers before we take someone that hurts our kids, wouldn't we? Value. All created with purpose by God. Now, some of them may be missing that purpose because of the way they live, their lifestyle. That's another byproduct of the me culture that we live in. I deserve to make me happy, even if it hurts others. All those people created by purpose. Created with purpose. How do we help them? Because that's really what we're here for, isn't it, church? How do we help culture? Let me give you the simple answer. We give them Jesus. We show them Jesus, okay? Share the gospel. This next part may get a little rough. It's what the Spirit laid on my heart to talk to you about today. But family, we need to bring to Jesus those people that we can't stand. Those people whose lifestyle makes us sick. My wife told me about a conversation that she had a little over a month ago, I think. And she was talking to someone that doesn't go to church here. And they seemed surprised, even a little put off maybe, that we would welcome anyone into our church. And I think the conversation specifically was about those in the LGBTQ community. And we say here, we welcome everyone, right? Everyone can come in and worship, and we do. But that's kind of the pat answer. As I thought about it a little more, I got a little worked up. The church, this church, exists to show Jesus to the world. We don't get to pick and choose who we show that to. We shouldn't anyway. So what's the true way to change someone's heart, to really change the world? To get Jesus in there. Get Jesus in there. So, yes, we welcome all those who need Jesus. We welcome those that are sexually immoral. And that's not just LGBTQ, friends. We welcome those that serve the idol of addiction. We welcome those that don't have a permanent address. We welcome those whose God is money, possessions, and status, and identity, no matter how different, no matter how distasteful. Because, church, if we don't, we fail. We fail. My daughter had, a few years back, she had a teacher at her school. She was in her class one year and then was out of her class. And this teacher was a really good teacher in some respects. But she was like the doctor that's very smart but has no bedside manner. Learned a lot from her, but her methodology with the students created a lot of conflict. Now, I'm a pretty non-conflict guy. But it got to the point where I felt like I needed to have a conversation with this teacher. And so I did, and it was all respectful. But one of the things I said to her was, if a student doesn't want to come to school because of you, haven't you already failed as an educator? Family, that's us. People should want to come here. Everyone should want to come here, should feel welcome here, because God created everyone with purpose and value. Just like you and I. We're created in His image. Every life is important. Every life needs Jesus. See, sometimes the calamity is not just in the secular culture. And I think we do pretty good here at this church. I really do. I want to leave you with just a couple things here as we talk about life today. Pray, serve, and speak. Ask God for compassion for every life, every single life, every person. Serve those that can't serve themselves. And speak. Share the truth in love. Share the truth in love. I want you to close your eyes just for a minute. Actually, for more than a minute. But before I pray, I want you to imagine, if you would, a world where the church is the place where people feel more valued than any place else? What would that look like?